The hall is quiet, too quiet. Shadows stretch across stone walls, broken only by the flicker of candlelight. The air smells of incense, sweet and heavy, but beneath it something lingers, something sharp, something metallic. A girl sits on the throne. Her crown tilts slightly, too large for her small head. Her feet don't reach the ground. They dangle above the marble floor, swinging like a child waiting for supper. She does not smile. She does not cry. She only stares straight ahead, as if staring long enough might make her vanish. The courtiers whisper, "Majesty," but she is only 12. Outside, music swells, flutes, drums, viols, celebration. But inside these walls, silence presses harder than sound. Cloaked women tighten her gown until she can barely breathe. Servants bow so low their foreheads touch the floor. The kingdom watches as a child is dressed as a relic. They call her chosen. They call her divine. But they never call her what she truly is, a girl. And one day soon, this girl will give birth to a child, a royal successor, and then she will disappear. So here is the question we must ask. How does a girl become a queen, only to vanish from the very history she created? Her name was almost lost, her story buried under gold and hymns, but fragments remain, notes, whispers, erased pages that refuse to stay silent, and tonight, we piece them together. Because girls like her, crowned too early, silenced too easily, remembered only in fragments, deserve more than a footnote. They deserve to be seen. Stay with us, because this story wasn't written for her, but it was lived by her, and someone must remember. If you believe voices like hers matter, if you believe truth should outlive the lies, then join us, subscribe, and help carry her name where history refused to. The girl queen erased from history after giving birth to the royal successor. Her life was brief, her silence was long, but her story begins now. She was born on a night painted red. The moon hung heavy, a perfect omen for priests and midwives who whispered of destiny. They said her first cry was too strong, too fierce for a newborn. They said the cord wrapped around her neck and yet she lived, and that meant she was chosen. From her very first breath, she was no longer just a child. She was a symbol. The palace did not wait. By the time she opened her eyes, the story had already been written for her. Every movement, every glance, every silence carried the weight of a crown she did not yet wear. Her mother bled for 3 days after the birth. No one spoke of that. What they did speak of were her tiny fists, curled tight as if grasping at power. They called her blessed. They called her proof that a fading bloodline could still survive, if she survived. But survival came at a cost. At 3, she was taught to walk with her hands folded. At 4, they took away her toy horse because queens do not ride. At 5, her first tutor placed a scroll in her lap, not with fairy tales, not with songs, but with treaties, decrees, wars fought and lost long before she was born. Every doll she owned wore a crown. Every mirror told her she was not a girl, but a vessel. The palace measured her meals, weighed her steps, counted the curve of her spine. Her body was not hers, it was the kingdom's. When she asked why, the answer was always the same, because one day she would carry the throne in her womb, and so her childhood began to vanish. No laughter echoing down corridors, no running in gardens, no simple joys, only posture lessons, silence drills, endless curtsies until her knees ached. Her tutors praised her for quiet, for stillness, for obedience. Every question she asked was answered with scripture. Every dream she dared whisper was folded shut inside her chest. The girl who once reached for toys now reached only for scrolls. The The girl who once smiled at stables now bowed her head until her neck stiffened. Piece by piece, she was erased. Not suddenly, not violently, but slowly, deliberately, until all that remained was a relic, a living symbol, a child dressed in the costume of destiny. Her cradle had barely grown cold, and already the crown was waiting. Her story, her choices, her voice were slipping away. And in their place, the dynasty carved something else. A queen in training, a girl reshaped by prophecy, a future written not by her own hand, but by those who believed her body was their kingdom's salvation. And she had no choice but to obey. The bells rang before dawn, low, heavy, echoing through stone corridors until the whole palace seemed to tremble. Servants rushed with silk, with gold, with wreaths of flowers plucked in the dark. Today was not an ordinary day. Today, a kingdom would be bound. The chapel glowed with candlelight. Ivory banners hung from the ceiling, stitched with lions and suns and serpents. 1,000 eyes turned toward the altar, waiting for the child who was about to become a queen. She stepped forward, her gown dragging behind her, too heavy for such small shoulders. Her veil floated like mist, hiding a face too young, too fragile. Her feet, still soft from childhood, stumbled on the stone. But the music did not pause. The courtiers did not flinch. This was a royal wedding, and no one dared question it. The people outside cheered, trumpets blared, wine spilled from golden cups. They called it sacred. They called it destiny. But behind the curtain, it was something else. A girl stood trembling while women laced her bodice until her ribs ached. She whispered for her mother. The room stayed silent. She asked if she might sit. They told her queens do not sit. And then the door creaked open. He entered. Her brother, her groom, only 4 years older, still a boy himself. But the crown on his head made him a man in their eyes. The courtiers bowed. The priests lowered their voices. He walked as if this was normal, as if marrying his sister was not a crime but a duty, as if she had a choice, but she did not. She knelt when they gestured. She spoke the vows they placed in her mouth like honey-coated chains. Her hands shook as he took them, steady, practiced, calm. She didn't look at his face. She fixed her eyes on the flame of a candle, burning, flickering, almost desperate, and prayed it might blind her. The priest's voice thundered. The rings were exchanged. A kiss sealed the union, not tender, not innocent, but deliberate. A king's kiss, public, heavy, final. The crowd erupted. They saw only triumph, purity, unity. They saw a prophecy fulfilled. They did not see the fear in her eyes. They didn't feel the way her knees trembled. They did not hear her whisper to herself, "Be still, be still, be still." Because in that moment, the girl was gone, swallowed whole by ritual, buried under gold, under silence, under expectation. And what remained, what the kingdom celebrated, was not a child at all. It was a queen without a choice, a queen who had been taught never to say no. The court rejoiced, the people sang. But she walked from the altar with fingers cold as ice. The kingdom crowned her with glory. But what she carried instead was fear. And from that day forward, she was no longer daughter, sister, child. She was a wife. She was a vessel. She was theirs. The wedding ended, but her captivity had only just begun. Each morning the doors of her chamber opened to the same ritual. Layers of silk slipped over her shoulders, gold chains draped across her neck, a crown set so tightly against her scalp it left faint bruises. They told her she looked radiant. They told her she was beloved. But the truth was simpler. She was controlled. Every gesture was rehearsed, every glance measured, when to sit, when to stand, when to bow her head, and when to smile. Even her silence was scripted. She learned to keep her lips closed just enough to breathe, but never enough to speak. The palace was not a home, it was a cage, and each wall was built with words like duty, devotion, destiny. Servants followed her every step. Advisors whispered of her obedience. Priests praised her for stillness, calling it grace. But stillness was not grace. Stillness was survival. Behind closed doors, she was taught lessons no child should learn. Not lessons of kindness, not lessons of choice, lessons of submission, lessons of silence. She was told never to resist, never to falter, never to reveal the fear that coiled inside her. And when she obeyed, they applauded. They toasted to her loyalty. They called her the perfect queen. In public, she glittered in gold. In private, she vanished into silence. At banquets, poets sang of her beauty. At court, her mother-in-law whispered she had the glow of a wife. The people cheered when she appeared on balconies, dressed like a vision carved from ivory. But they did not see the trembling in her hands. They did not see how her eyes avoided mirrors, as if afraid of who might look back. The court called her devotion divine, but devotion was never her choice. It was demanded, it was enforced, and so, each day blurred into the next, silk in the morning, silence at night, obedience always. The kingdom praised her as a symbol of purity. But inside she felt herself fading, not all at once, piece by piece, until the girl she once was gone, and all that remained was a queen-shaped shadow. It began quietly. A single morning when she leaned over the edge of her bed and felt her stomach twist. She pressed her sleeve to her lips, swallowed hard, and said nothing. But secrets never last long in a palace. By the end of the week, they all knew. The bishop called it a miracle. The court physician bowed lower than ever before. The priest declared it a blessing from heaven, proof that the bloodline was safe, proof that the crown would endure. No one said the word pregnant. That would be vulgar. Instead, they spoke in riddles. They called her a vessel. They called her the mother of destiny. They called her everything except what she truly was, a 12-year-old child. Pain became her constant companion, her limbs heavy, her skin pale, her breath shorter with each passing day. Still, they painted her as radiant. The court painter began a new portrait, the queen as vessel. Silk draped over her growing form, a faint smile brushed on her lips. In the portrait she looked serene. In truth, she was breaking. The palace adjusted her gowns to reveal her swelling stomach. Ministers spoke of her as though she were not even in the room. They debated the succession, the prophecy, the heir. While she sat silently, her hands folded in her lap, wishing only for air. At night, she whispered to herself. She traced the lines of her own palm, reminding herself where her skin ended and the child inside her began. Even that was starting to blur. Sometimes, she asked to see her mother's grave. They told her no. Too much risk, too much movement, too many eyes. Sometimes, she asked if her brother, her husband, would visit her less now. They told her no. That would look suspicious. So she found her own ways to resist. Small ways, quiet ways. She began to keep a piece of bread beneath her pillow, just in case the child came hungry, just in case she did not live to feed it. She hid questions in whispers to angels carved into her chamber ceiling, though they never answered. Her body ached, her mind frayed. Dreams turned to nightmares, blood-soaked, breathless visions that woke her before dawn. The midwives hovered, the priests prayed louder, the kingdom cheered. But inside, she felt herself fading. They told her she was sacred. They told her she was chosen. But sacred things are not held gently. Sacred things are broken open. And with every passing day, she felt less like a girl and more like an offering. Her life rewritten in the language of prophecy. Her name replaced with titles. Her body reduced to a cradle. The kingdom called her miracle. But she knew the truth. She was not a miracle. She was a child. And soon, she would be a mother who was never given the chance to grow up herself. It began with pain, not sharp but slow, crawling up her spine, tightening in her belly like a fist that would not unclench. She tried to stand, but the world spun. Her knees buckled. The midwife caught her before she hit the floor. "It's too early," they whispered. But the child did not care. The chamber was sealed, curtains drawn, windows barred, a brazier lit in the corner, spilling heavy smoke of the herbs that made her gag. 6 women surrounded her bed, not speaking her name, only titles, not offering comfort, only commands. Breathe, push, pray. The hours dragged. Sweat soaked her gown. Her small hands clawed at the sheets until her nails tore. She screamed once, not words, not even sound, but raw terror pulled from the child still buried inside her. They hushed her. They told her this was normal, that queens had done this for centuries, but queens were not 12. Outside, her brother waited, not pacing, not weeping. He spoke calmly with his advisors about the child's name, about coronation plans, about how to announce the heir. Inside, her body was unraveling. The baby would not turn. Hands pressed against her stomach, forcing, prodding, reshaping her agony. Her lips went dry. Her eyes rolled back. A midwife held her hand and whispered she was brave. She wasn't. She was dying. And then, before dawn, the chamber filled with a cry, not hers, the child's, strong, demanding, alive. They wrapped him in cloth of gold. They placed him in arms that were not hers. The kingdom rejoiced. The heir was here, the prophecy fulfilled, and the mother. Her lips moved once, forming a word no one could hear. Then her body went still, not peaceful, not soft, just still. They covered her with velvet. They called it a complication. They said she was too fragile. They blamed time. They blamed God, but never themselves. No bells tolled, no morning announced. The court drank wine. The poets wrote verses. The painter prepared his canvas. The queen in eternal sleep. Her brother lifted a goblet in one hand and the child in the other. The hall erupted with cheers. Trumpets sang. The kingdom celebrated life, and no one dared speak of death. A girl had vanished. A queen had been erased. Her body silenced so the bloodline could live. She was 12, and she died giving birth to the royal successor. The palace roared with triumph, but in that chamber behind the curtains, beneath the velvet, there was only silence. Her silence. They did not bury her body alone. They buried her story. The very morning her son was placed in a gilded cradle, the palace began its work. Pain was rewritten into poetry. Screams were reshaped into silence. A child was recast as a saint. The court painters worked quickly. One canvas showed her seated, serene, with the infant in her arms. But she never held him. That moment never happened. They cut it from truth and stitched it into myth. The poets called her sacrifice divine. The priest bowed lower than ever, declaring her womb twice blessed. Her death was not called tragedy. It was called destiny. She was no longer a girl. She was no longer 12. She was the mother sovereign. Hymns praised her obedience. Statues carved her in marble. Tall, mature, radiant, a woman she had never lived long enough to become. her smallness erased, her fear erased, her youth erased. What remained was not her, but an invention. They told the people she had given her life willingly. They told the kingdom she was holy, chosen, sacred. But no one spoke of her age. No one spoke of her tears. No one spoke of how she'd whispered for her mother in the final hours. Her truth was scattered into fragments, a line missing in the marriage registry, a page torn from the family Bible, a journal hidden away, vanished after a servant discovered her dreams of escape. The records did not forget her. They concealed her. Even the words around her changed. Child became queen. Victim became sacrifice. Silence became virtue. And so the girl was transformed into something she never was, a holy relic, a story told to strengthen a dynasty, a legend without a voice. But the cracks remained, a smudged note in a midwife's hand, a broken statue, its head missing, its name worn away by moss, faded whispers preserved in shadows, proof that she existed not as they said, but as she was, a child, erased by power. The kingdom called her holy, but history, if you look closely, reveals what they hid. She was not a saint. She was not a sacrifice. She was a girl, and they erased her to protect the crown. For centuries, her name was a whisper, a shadow pressed beneath marble floors. The official record spoke of triumph, of prophecy, of holy sacrifice, but the truth refused to stay silent. It surfaced in fragments, a note folded inside a priest's robe, 8 words written in faded ink. She screamed, and none of us moved unsigned, unclaimed, but undeniable. A midwife's record stained with something dark and ancient. It listed the hours of labour, the weight of the child, and then one final line. The mother lost too much, a statue in a palace garden, its head long gone, its figure crumbling. Once it showed a queen holding a child. Now only broken stone remains. The plaque calls her the Queen of Peace. But the name beneath is buried in moss, each fragment by itself, small, forgettable. But together they formed a picture, not of the saint the court praised, not of the sacrifice the priests preached, but of a girl, 12 years old, who was swallowed by silence. Historians pieced her story from the margins, from erased names in registries, from portraits altered to make her seem older, stronger, willing, from rumours passed down by servants whose voices were never meant to be heard. Official memory crowned her holy. Buried truth revealed her as human. The tension between those two worlds still lingers. One world gilded her with gold, the other showed the bruises beneath. One world sang hymns of devotion, the other whispered of screams behind sealed doors, and in the end, we see it clearly. She wasn't erased, she was buried under paintings that lied, buried under hymns that praised obedience, buried under a crown too heavy for a child to carry. But time has a way of loosening soil, of letting fragments rise again, and now her story, piece by piece, breathes once more. Not as the court wanted her remembered, not as a saint, not as a sacrifice, but as she truly was, a girl, a queen in name, but a child in truth, a voice stolen, but not lost forever. Because here, in the cracks of history, her fragments still speak. Her story is not just the past, it is a mirror showing us how dynasties once fed on the bodies of children, how religion was used to sanctify suffering, how entire kingdoms rewrote pain into prophecy. And though centuries have passed, the pattern remains. Even today, girls are married before they're grown. Even today, institutions cover up abuse, call it tradition, call it honour. Even today, voices are silenced so that power can survive unchallenged. Her life reminds us of the cost, of what is lost when a child becomes a symbol, of what is destroyed when innocence is sacrificed for legacy. She was not a myth. She was not a holy relic. She was not a queen carved in marble. She was a child who whispered questions to angels at night, a child who hid bread under her pillow out of fear, a child who longed for her mother's grave and was told no. And when the crown erased her name, when the court called her sacrifice, when the priest called her holy, history turned away. But we do not turn away. To remember her is an act of justice. To speak her name is to break the silence that buried her. And to carry her story forward is to ensure that the next generation will not mistake obedience for virtue or suffering for glory. Because her story is not just about a forgotten queen. It is about every girl forced into silence, every truth rewritten, every life turned into legend to hide the cruelty beneath. So when you leave here tonight, remember her not as a myth, not as a saint, but as she was, a child, and carry that truth with you. If you believe stories like hers should never be lost again, if you believe history should serve the forgotten as much as the powerful, then join us, subscribe, help us preserve the voices that were never meant to be heard. Because the girl queen may have been buried in silence, but together we can make sure she's remembered in truth.